Emily Thompson sat in her small blue car, her hands shaking as she held the steering wheel. She looked at her watch again and again. 30 minutes. She had only 30 minutes to get to the most important job interview of her life. The morning had started perfectly. Emily had woken up early, put on her best black suit, and practiced her answers one more time in the mirror. She had been preparing for this interview at Sterling and Associates for months. This marketing job would change everything for her at 20 years old. She had her whole life planned out like a perfect puzzle, and this job was the missing piece. She had left her apartment with plenty of time to spare. The drive to the city center usually took 40 minutes, and she had given herself an hour. Everything was going according to plan until she saw the bright orange signs blocking the main road. Road close. Construction work. Find alternative route. The signs read in bold black letters. Emily felt her heart skip a beat. But she stayed calm. She had her phone with the GPS app. Technology would save her. She turned onto a side street, following the electronic voice that promised to guide her safely to her destination. But as she drove deeper into an older part of town, something went wrong. Her phone screen showed a spinning circle, then nothing. No signal, no map, no helpful voice telling her where to turn. The streets round her looked completely different from anywhere she had ever been. The houses were small and old, with peeling paint and tiny front yards. Some had broken fences. Others had children's toys scattered on the grass. This was not the clean, modern part of the city where she lived and worked. No, 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 Emily whispered to herself, her voice getting higher with each word. She could feel panic rising in her chest like hot water boiling over. She turned left, then right, then left again. But nothing looked familiar. Every street looked the same, and she was getting more lost with each turn. She checked her watch again. 20 minutes left. Even if she found the right road now, she would be late. Being late to this interview was not an option. She had worked so hard for this opportunity. She had spent years building her resume, taking extra courses, working long hours at her current job that she hated, all for this moment. Then she heard a strange noise coming from under the hood of her car. It was a grinding, coughing sound that made her stomach drop. The car began to shake, and she could smell something burning. This could not be happening. Not today. Not now. The car made one final loud cough and then stopped completely. Emily tried turning the key, but nothing happened. She was stuck in the middle of a narrow street she had never seen before, with no phone signal and no way to get to her interview. She sat in silence for a moment, staring straight ahead, right in front of her was a small, old building that had seen better days. The brick walls were faded, and some of the windows had cracks in them. But there was a hand-painted sign hanging above the front door that read Sunnydale Community Center in cheerful blue and yellow letters through the large windows. Emily could see inside the building. There were children everywhere. Some were sitting at small tables with books and papers in front of them. Others were playing games in a corner. A few were drawing pictures with colorful crayons. Despite the old building, the scene inside looked warm and full of life. The children were laughing and talking to each other. Their voices created a happy buzz that Emily could hear even from inside her broken car. For a moment, she forgot about her interview and just watched them. Some of the children looked very young, maybe 6 or 7 years old. Others seemed to be around 10 or 12. Then Emily noticed an elderly woman inside the center. She had beautiful silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and was wearing a simple purple cardigan. The woman was moving from table to table, helping different children with their work. She would lean down to look at a child's drawing, smile and say something that made the child beam with pride. Then she would move to another table and patiently help a boy with his reading. The woman happened to look toward the window and saw Emily sitting in her car, even from a distance. She could tell that Emily was upset. The woman's face immediately showed concern, and she walked toward the front door of the center. Emily watched as the woman stepped outside and began walking toward her car. She had kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when she smiled, and her face showed genuine worry for a complete stranger. "Are you all right, dear?" the woman asked as she approached Emily's car window. Her voice was gentle and warm, like a grandmother talking to her grandchild. Emily looked round at everything that had gone wrong. Her car was broken. Her phone had no signal. She had missed the interview that was supposed to change her life. Her perfect plan was falling apart, piece by piece. She felt tears beginning to form in her eyes, and for the first time that day, she realized that sometimes the most important journeys begin when we think everything has gone completely wrong. The elderly woman opened Emily's car door and extended her hand with a warm smile. "I'm Margaret," she said in a voice that sounded like comfort itself. "Come inside with me, dear. We'll figure this out together." Emily hesitated for a moment. She was a stranger in an unfamiliar place, and Margaret was someone she had never met before. But there was something about Margaret's kind eyes and gentle manner that made Emily feel safe. She took Margaret's hand and stepped out of her broken car. "I was supposed to be at an interview," Emily said, her voice shaking. "This was the most important day of my life, and everything has gone wrong." Margaret nodded with understanding. "Sometimes life has different plans for us than we have for ourselves," she said softly. "Let's get you inside where it's warm." Emily followed Margaret toward the front door of the community center. As they walked, she could hear the sounds of children talking and laughing more clearly. It was a sound she wasn't used to in her world of office buildings and business meetings. She rarely heard genuine laughter like this the moment they stepped inside. Emily was struck by how different this place felt from anywhere she had ever been. The building was clearly old, with worn wooden floors and walls that needed a fresh coat of paint. But despite its age, the space felt alive with warmth and energy. Children were everywhere, and each one seemed to be busy with something important. Some sat at small round tables with their school books open, working on homework with serious expressions on their young faces. Others were in a reading corner, quietly turning pages of colorful picture books. A group of children near the windows were working on art projects, their fingers covered in paint and their faces bright with concentration. "This is our after-school program," Margaret explained as she guided Emily to a small kitchen area in the corner of the main room. "These wonderful children come here every single day after school finishes." Margaret began preparing tea, moving with the practiced ease of someone who had done this countless times before. Emily watched her hands as she filled the kettle and reached for two mismatched cups from a cabinet. "Their parents work very hard," Margaret continued, her voice filled with both sadness and pride. "Most of them have 2 or even 3 jobs just to pay for rent and food. They can't be home when their children finish school, so the children come here instead." Emily looked round the room again, seeing it with new understanding. These weren't just children playing and doing homework. These were young people whose families were struggling, who needed a safe place to go when school ended and home wasn't available yet. "We give them something their busy lives don't always provide," Margaret said, handing Emily a steaming cup of tea. "A place where they can learn and grow, where adults care about them, and where they can just be children." As Emily sipped her tea, she watched Margaret begin to move around the room. The elderly woman seemed to know exactly what each child needed. She walked to a table where a boy with dark hair was struggling with a book. "That's James," Margaret whispered to Emily. Reading is difficult for him, but he tries so hard every day. Margaret sat down next to James and began helping him sound out the difficult words. Emily could see the boy's face light up each time he successfully read a sentence. Margaret would smile and nod, encouraging him with gentle words and patient guidance. Next, Margaret moved to a quiet girl who was working alone on a drawing. The child had been sitting silently. But when Margaret approached, she looked up with shy eyes. Lucy is very artistic, Margaret explained later. She doesn't speak much, but she expresses herself beautifully through her drawings. Margaret spent whole minutes with Lucy, admiring her artwork and asking quiet questions about the colors she had chosen. Emily watched as the little girl's face slowly broke into a smile, her shyness melting away under Margaret's attention. Then there was a sudden cheer from across the room. A boy named Tom had been working on math problems, and he had just solved one that had been giving him trouble. Margaret hurried over to celebrate with him, clapping her hands and telling him how proud she was of his hard work. "I've been running this place for 15 years. Margaret told Emily as they watched Tom beam with pride. "We don't have much money here. Our furniture is old. Our books are donated, and our supplies come from whatever people can spare." Margaret paused and looked around the room at all the children who were working, playing and learning together. "But we have something that money can't buy," she continued. "We have hope. We have community. We have people who care about each other." Emily felt something strange happening in her chest as she watched Margaret and the children interact. She had spent years working in offices where people competed against each other, where success was measured only by money and titles. She had never seen adults and children connect with such genuine care and joy. The interview she had missed suddenly seemed less important, for the first time in many years. Emily was seeing something real and meaningful, and it was changing how she thought about everything. Emily went home that day with Margaret's words and the children's laughter still echoing in her mind. She tried to focus on her regular evening routine, checking emails, preparing for the next day's work, watching television, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the community center. She found herself thinking about James and how proud he had looked when he read the difficult sentence. She remembered Lucy's shy smile when Margaret praised her drawing. She could still hear Tom's excited cheer when he solved his math problem. These moments felt more real and important than anything that had happened in her office. Months. The next few days at work dragged by slowly. Emily sat at a desk creating marketing campaigns for products she didn't care about, attending meetings that seemed pointless, and listening to her co-workers complain about deadlines and office politics. Everything felt grey and lifeless compared to the warmth and energy she had experienced at the community center. By Friday, Emily had made a decision. She would go back to visit Margaret and the children on Saturday, just to see how they were doing. She told herself, just to make sure James was still making progress with his reading. When Saturday morning came, Emily drove back to the community center. This time, she knew exactly where she was going. Margaret's face lit up when she saw Emily walk through the door. "Emily, how wonderful to see you again," Margaret said, giving her a warm hug. "The children have been asking about you all week." Emily felt a flutter of happiness in her chest. She had never had anyone ask about her at work when she was absent. The idea that these children, whom she had only met once, had been thinking about her was both surprising and touching. "I thought I might help out today, if that's okay," Emily said, trying to sound casual. "I don't have any special training with children, but I could assist with homework or something simple like that." Margaret's smile grew even brighter. "That would be absolutely wonderful. We can always use an extra pair of hands." Emily spent the entire Saturday at the community center. She helped James with his reading, working patiently through a picture book about a brave little mouse. She sat with a group of children during their art time, watching them create colorful pictures of their families and dreams. She even helped serve snacks, learning each child's name and favorite foods. When it was time to leave, Emily realized she didn't want to go. The day had flown by faster than any day she could remember. She felt energized and happy in a way that was completely new to her. "I'll come back next Saturday," she found herself promising Margaret. "We would love that," Margaret replied. "You're a natural with the children." True to her word, Emily returned the following Saturday, and then the Saturday after that, soon. She was coming twice a week, then 3 times. What had started as occasional visits became a regular part of her life that she looked forward to more than anything else. "I just need something different in my routine," she told herself when friends asked why she was spending so much time volunteering. But deep in her heart, Emily knew it was much more than that. Something fundamental was changing inside her daughters. Weeks passed. Emily became deeply involved in the daily life of the community center. She started helping with homework sessions, sitting with children who struggled with math and reading. She organized reading circles where children could share their favorite stories and discover new books together. Emily began to know each child as an individual. There was David, a 10-year-old boy who was very smart but afraid to speak up in groups. Emily worked with him patiently, encouraging him to share his ideas and celebrating each time he raised his hand to answer a question. Slowly, David began to gain confidence, and Emily felt proud every time she saw him participate more actively. Then there was Sophie, a 9-year-old girl with a wild imagination who loved to create stories. Emily started a special storytelling time just for Sophie and other creative children. She watched Sophie's eyes light up as she told tales about magical adventures and brave heroes. Sophie's stories became more elaborate and confident each week, and Emily realized she was witnessing a young writer discovering her gift. One of Emily's favorite success stories was Oliver, a 7-year-old who had struggled with reading since kindergarten. Emily worked with Oliver every week, using simple books and lots of patience. The day Oliver read his first complete book from start to finish, Emily felt more pride and joy than she had experienced from any work accomplishment in her entire career. But while Emily's time at the community center filled her with purpose and happiness, her regular job began to feel increasingly empty and meaningless. She sat in her office cubicle creating advertisements for expensive shoes that most people couldn't afford, or marketing campaigns for electronic gadgets that would be thrown away within a year. At the community center, Emily was helping to shape young minds and futures. At work, she was convincing people to buy things they didn't really need. The contrast became more obvious and uncomfortable every day. "You have a real gift with these children," Margaret told Emily one evening as they cleaned up after a particularly busy day. "I can see how much they light up when you walk through that door." Emily realized that she felt exactly the same way about the children. Emily was at home on Tuesday evening, preparing dinner and thinking about the reading circle she would lead at the community center the next day, when her phone rang. She saw Margaret's name on the screen and answered with a smile. "Hello, Margaret. How are you doing?" But instead of Margaret's usual cheerful voice, Emily heard something that made her heart sink. Margaret was crying. Her voice was shaking so badly that Emily could barely understand the words. "Emily, dear," Margaret said through her tears, "I have terrible news. The center is closing." Emily felt the world spin round her. She sat down heavily in her kitchen chair, gripping the phone tightly. "What do you mean, closing?" "The city council met yesterday. Margaret explained, her voice breaking. They cut our funding completely. They said they need to save money for other projects. I've been trying to find other sources of money, but I don't have enough to keep the program running. Emily's mind raced. The community center couldn't close. Those children needed a safe place to go after school. They needed the homework help, the reading circles, the art projects, and most importantly, they needed adults who cared about them. "How much time do we have?" Emily asked. "2 weeks," Margaret whispered. "I have to tell the children tomorrow. I don't know how I'm going to explain it to them." After Emily hung up the phone, she sat in her kitchen staring at the wall. She thought about David, who had finally started speaking up in groups and was reading more difficult books every week. She thought about Sophie, whose storytelling had become so creative and confident that other children gathered round to listen. She thought about Oliver, who had been struggling with reading for so long. Art was finally making real progress. What would happen to these children? Their parents worked multiple jobs and couldn't be home when school ended. Without the community center, the children would have to stay on the streets or in empty apartments by themselves. They would lose their safe place to learn and grow. They would lose the adults who believed in them. Emily couldn't sleep that night. She lay in bed thinking about all the children she had come to love. She thought about Margaret, who had dedicated 15 years of her life to helping these young people. She thought about the laughter, the learning, the moments of pride and joy she had witnessed at the center. By morning, Emily had made the biggest and most important decision of her entire life. She got dressed in her best business clothes and drove to her office building. She walked through the familiar hallways, past the cubicles where her co-workers were already busy with their morning emails and coffee. She knocked on her boss's office door. "Come in," Mr. Johnson called. Emily walked into the office where she had received promotions and praise for her marketing campaigns. She looked at her boss, who had always been pleased with her work, and took a deep breath. "I'm resigning," she said clearly. "Today is my last day." Double quotes. Mr. Johnson looked shocked. He put down his coffee cup and stared at her. "Emily, what's wrong? Are you feeling sick? Did something happen?" "Nothing's wrong," Emily said. "I've found something more important to do with my life." She cleaned out her desk, said goodbye to her surprised co-workers, and left the office building for the last time. As she walked to her car, Emily felt scared but also more alive than she had in years. Her friends thought she had lost her mind. "Are you crazy?" her best friend Sarah asked when Emily told her what she had done. "You worked so hard to get that job. You're throwing away everything you've built. What about your career? What about your future?" "This is my future," Emily replied. "I'm going to save the community center." Emily had some money saved in her bank account. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to start with. More importantly, she had years of marketing experience and skills that she could use in a completely different way. She spent the next week working harder than she had ever worked in her life. She used a laptop to create social media campaigns about the community center. She wrote posts explaining what the center meant to the children and families in the neighborhood. She shared photos of the children learning and playing, being careful to protect their privacy while showing their joy and progress. Emily organized fundraising events. She contacted local businesses, explaining the situation and asking for donations. She wrote letters to community organizations and churches. She created flyers and put them up around the neighborhood. The work was exhausting. Emily worked from early morning until late at night, making phone calls, writing emails, and meeting with potential donors. Some days she felt overwhelmed and wondered if she was making a terrible mistake. She had given up a steady, Job with good pay for something completely uncertain. But then she would visit the community center and see the hope in the children's eyes. She would see Margaret's grateful smile and hear the children asking if their safe place would really be saved. She would see neighbors and parents starting to volunteer their time and energy to help with her fundraising efforts. Slowly, something amazing began to happen. Donations started coming in from people Emily had never met. The local newspaper wrote a story about the center's situation. People who had never heard of the community center before began offering help. 2 years had passed since the terrible Tuesday evening when Margaret had called with the devastating news. Now, Emily stood in the main room of the Sunnydale Community Center. But it looked nothing like the small, struggling place she had first discovered when her car broke down. The old building had been completely transformed. The walls were painted in bright, cheerful colors that made the space feel warm and welcoming. New windows let in streams of sunlight that danced across clean, polished floors. Modern tables and chairs filled the room, and they were comfortable. Reading corners with soft cushions and bookshelves full of new books. But the most amazing change was not in the building itself. It was in the number of children who now called the center their second home. Where there had once been 20 children, now over 100 young people came through the doors every day after school and during weekends. Emily walked slowly through the different areas of the center, watching the incredible variety of activities that were now available. In one corner, a group of teenagers were working with volunteer tutors on their high school math homework. Nearby, younger children were engaged in an art class. Their faces concentrated as they painted colorful pictures on large sheets of paper. Through the windows, Emily could see children playing basketball and soccer on the new outdoor courts that had been built with donated materials and volunteer labor. The sounds of their laughter and friendly competition drifted through the building, adding to the atmosphere of joy and energy. The center now offered so much more than Emily had ever imagined possible. There were tutoring, programs for every subject and age group. Art classes taught children to express themselves through painting, drawing, and sculpture. Sports programs kept children active and taught them about teamwork and healthy competition. One of Emily's proudest achievements was the college preparation workshop that met every Saturday morning. High school students worked with volunteer mentors to prepare for college entrance exams, write application essays, and learn about scholarships and financial aid. Many of these teenagers would be the first in their families to attend college, and Emily felt honored to help them reach for their dreams. The small library in the back of the center had grown from a single bookshelf to an entire room. Filled with thousands of books for readers of all ages, children could check out books to take home. There were comfortable chairs where they could sit quietly and read during their time at the center. As Emily continued a tour through the transformed space, she looked for the children who had been there from the very beginning. She found David leading a group discussion about a book they had all read together. The shy boy who had once been afraid to speak up was now a confident young leader who helped newer children feel welcome. And included Dot in the art room, Emily discovered Sophie working on the latest edition of the center's monthly newsletter. The quiet girl who had once expressed herself only through drawings was now writing stories and articles that inspired other children to share their own creativity and ideas. Near the library, Emily spotted Oliver helping a group of first-grade students with their reading. The little boy who had struggled so much with books was now in middle school and had already announced his plans to become a teacher someday. He spent his free time at the center tutoring younger children, showing them the same patience and encouragement that Emily and Margaret had once shown him. Margaret appeared beside Emily, moving with the same gentle energy she had always possessed. Despite being in her 70s now, Margaret seemed more alive and energetic than ever. The success of the center and the growth of the programs had given her new purpose and joy. "Look at what you've accomplished," Margaret said, squeezing Emily's hand warmly. "You saved this place, dear. You saved all of these children's futures." Emily felt tears of happiness forming in her eyes, but she shook her head gently. "No, Margaret, they saved me first. These children and this place showed me who I was meant to be." It was true. Emily's life had changed completely from those days when she had worked in the corporate office, creating marketing campaigns for products that didn't matter. She earned much less money now than she had in her previous job. She worked longer hours, often staying at the center until late in the evening to help with homework or prepare for the next day's activities. Every day brought new challenges. There were always funding issues to solve, programs to organize, and problems to address. Emily dealt with everything from broken equipment to difficult family situations to complex scheduling conflicts. Her days were unpredictable and demanding in ways her old office job had never been. But despite all the difficulties and uncertainties, Emily woke up every single morning excited about the day ahead. She jumped out of bed, eager to see what new discoveries the children would make, what problems they would solve together, and what moments of joy and learning they would share. Standing in the center that had once seemed like the worst possible wrong turn in her life, Emily understood something important about how life works. Sometimes the most beautiful and meaningful experiences come to us when we least expect them. Getting lost had led her to exactly the place where she belonged. The indie